Hi, everyone. I am Caitlin Brown. I'm the Communications Director at Community Legal Services of Philadelphia. I'm so glad that we can do this today. I am having a couple of little tech things happening right now, but I think we can get through this. So I wanted to start off by doing a quick announcement, which is that if you have a question during the presentation, please do enter it in the chat like Kelly said. If your question is going to be so complicated that you don't want to enter it in the chat, just say, I have a question about XYZ. I will not be looking at the chat during the presentation, but Kelly will interrupt me for anything urgent. But I will take a look at the Q&A portion of this. I will take a look at the chat. First, I just want to give some thank yous to the people behind the scenes who actually did a lot of work on this too. So first, I would love to thank Aldersea Lamb from CLS. She actually formatted the PowerPoint for me. She's the one who made it beautiful and branded, so thank you, Aldersea, for that. I want to thank Sean Morrow from North Penn, who I don't think can be here today, and Steve Grum from Legal Aid of Western Michigan. Both of them gave me really important feedback on the presentation, so thank you. I want to thank Brianna Bosak, who is the new communications officer at Plan. She gave me really great feedback and also helped me with some of the consistency of the presentation, so thank you, Brianna. And finally, Kelly Bach-Yeckley for putting this all together. I really appreciate all of your hard work. You do a great job every year, and I'm so thankful that you do this, so thank you. Okay, so on to the presentation. This is methods for messaging. We are going to talk about a variety of communications tools, mostly online tools because we are both in the digital age and working remotely, many of us are. So I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about how we do communications in that regard. And of course, I'm having all these tech problems. So let's see if we can do it. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do whenever you are doing any kind of communications whatsoever, and I mean every single tweet, every single paragraph that you write for your board, every single Facebook post, every single newsletter item, the first thing you absolutely have to do is know your audience. Every single thing you do has an audience, and that audience is never the general public. Every single thing you do has a goal, and that goal is never awareness. So if you are, saying, I want to do this Facebook post to raise awareness about eviction for the general public, you're not quite doing it right. So I'm not going to go through this list, but this is a list of types of audiences. You may have other audiences, but just know that everything that you do, you need to know who your audience is first, and you need to know sort of where they're getting their information. So when I say that you have a goal, again, it's not raising awareness. It's really a very specific goal. I want you to get almost as specific as possible with your goal. So it might be that you want to talk about LIHEAP. Well, what do you want to do with LIHEAP? Do you want to get somebody to apply for LIHEAP on time? Do you want to get somebody to call your intake hotline if they're having a problem accessing LIHEAP? I want you to get that specific. So these are some of the goals. And as you can see, they go for different audiences, right? So, I mean, write an article about you is probably not a client goal. I would imagine it's a journalist goal. This is the kind of thing when I'm talking about when I say like really specific goals. I would even say, registering for an event is not really the same as like, well, is it a know your rights presentation or is it a fundraising event? Like get really specific. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do the second that you are going to do anything related to communications whatsoever, the second you even think about it, you need to develop talking points. So if you know that we're in a pandemic and a lot of people are being illegally evicted, well, what are your talking points around illegal eviction? It's not just like, illegal eviction is happening and it's bad, right? Those are not talking points. It's, during the pandemic, landlords are shutting off people's utilities, people are getting kicked out of their homes, but there is this law, this intake hotline, this thing we want people to do. You need to really think about what are you actually trying to share. It's not just, it's very goal oriented. So whatever you're trying to do, think about that goal and make your talking points. I'm not going to go through the value problem solution action model because some people have been through that training, but it also would take a whole lot of time. So what I'm going to ask you to do is Google Opportunity Agenda VPSA model and just take a look at their website because there's a ton of information on how you do talking points. And I think maybe that's something that I would do a separate session on, but for now, just know that that is a good resource for you to check out. Okay, so I titled this Why Social Media, but I also really mean newsletters and even some media and things like that. But a lot of this is going to be social media, especially if you have a brand new communications program or no communications program at all. So basically, social media is, I mean, I'm not going to say everyone is on it because then someone will chime into the comments and say that they're not on social media, but millions and millions and millions of people are on social media. Odds are, even if you're not on social media, you have a friend or family member who is. It's mostly free. The caveat being that I think sometimes ads do really well on Facebook, and we can talk about that. One thing that's really been great about social media, especially during the pandemic, is that people can actually, we're finding that people can access this stuff on their own time. So if you have a client who is working all day long and they can't come into your office, you know, when we were working in the office, they can access something on Facebook, right? They might get off of work at 7 p.m. and they might hop right on Facebook. That happens a lot. And so that's an example of why you actually really do want to have social media, because it's actually a super accessible tool. We will talk a little bit about, you know, all the values of like what you can do on social media, but just think about it in terms of like building relationships with everyone, right? With your target audiences. And it's actually, it does take a little while in the beginning to learn how to use social media, for sure. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. And the nice thing is that you can share responsibilities so that multiple staff members at your organization can use it. So, you know, we recently had a Twitter takeover with Jolene Price, who is an attorney in our energy unit. And we actually had her tweet from our account for a whole day. And it was great. It was phenomenal. It was like, you know, she found it easy to use. We found it easy for us to do. We also, our housing unit and our employment unit do Facebook Live events. And we have people in those units actually manage those events. They set everything up. They, you know, do them. And so that's really, it's a great way to share responsibilities. A lot of people do not have a full-time communications person at their organization. And even if you do, it's really nice to work with your staff and do the stuff together. So I feel like if I don't address some of the barriers and downsides, people will address them for me. So I will say that I think the biggest ones are that it does take a lot of time, right? You really have to, you know, if you only tweet once a week, you're not going to get any Twitter followers. You're going to tweet to 30 people and you're going to feel like you're tweeting into the void, and it's not going to feel worth your time. If you tweet a few times a day, which does take a lot of time, you're going to end up with thousands of followers, right? And then it actually becomes useful. But it does take time to start off with. Again, not everyone's on social media. We do find that, you know, maybe some older adults are not on social media, although, you know, my grandmother used social media in her 80s. So, you know, people are on it. A lot of people, you know, will share information. If I know that one of my neighbors is at risk of being evicted and I see something about eviction on Facebook, I'm sure going to share that with my neighbor, and many people do that. And then I also just sort of feel like when you're, you know, this is really not, most of you are not going to be tagging elected officials in your posts anyway, but I just feel like you want to be really strategic when you know, are tagging people, especially if it's something negative about them. It does take a lot of thought and strategy. In general, I don't tag people if we're saying something negative about them. But it just, you know, there are some things to think about that I really don't think that last bullet applies to most of you, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. So I'm going to give you some general best practices for social media. These are honestly not in any particular order, but these are all kind of important things that I really want to make sure you understand. And this goes for pretty much everything that you're doing. So this is social media, and then, you know, some other communications tools. So I think the first thing is that when you have graphics, photos, flyers, those are better than just a plain text post. So what I like to do is post a flyer on social media and then maybe make some smaller graphics that have the information sort of, you know, zoomed in a little bit bigger. Always link to a PDF or your website, if it, you know, something that is like screen reader friendly, because people can enlarge it, people can print it, and people who have accessibility issues can still, you know, read it or use a screen reader. I really think, again, that you kind of have to post on social media 1 or 2 times per day if you can do it, minimum 3 times per week. CLS posts all day long. I'm not expecting that from most of you. I am saying that if you can find a way to post, you know, that regularly, you will build a following and it will become worth it. And that's why I'm telling you to use those talking points that I, you know, told you to write, is because when you see articles that come out, you know, if you see an article about eviction and you're not quoted in it, but you have something to say about eviction, you can post that on your social media with with your spin on it. It will, if you have talking points, it'll only take you a few minutes. I will say this morning I did upload into the drive, and I might have done it too late, I might not have, but I did upload into the drive a couple of documents for you. One is a draft document. Our staff at CLS has not seen it yet, most of them have not, but it's about how to create flyers to be really useful flyers, especially for social media. So that has some really important tips in it. The other thing that I posted, and a lot of you have seen this, I think, is my communications in 60 minutes a day or less document. That's a few years old, but it's still useful. It will tell you kind of how to really, in less than an hour a day, come up with content for your social media. So that's in there. So take a look at that. And I think that's a really good starting point. If you think that posting once or twice a day is super overwhelming, that's a really good place to start. And then I always tell people, write it for Twitter first, because you only have 280 characters, and then expand it for other platforms if you need to write a little bit more. And the reason why you do that is because, I don't want a 5-paragraph essay posted to Facebook. I just don't. I want you to think about, how can you say something in a few sentences? Do that. And that's why you want to start with Twitter, because if you can write it for Twitter, if you can boil it down to a tweet, you can explain it to someone. One of my pet peeves, I'm not trying to attack anyone here, but one of my pet peeves is when organizations have multiple social media accounts, so that different projects have their own social media account, or different units, or different events, or anything like that. That's a pet peeve of mine. You want to have one account. That's how you build your following. And this kind of goes for different websites too, and I believe I have this later in the presentation. Keep everything on one website, keep everything on one social media account. A lot of our clients have more than one legal problem, right? If they have a problem with their unemployment compensation, they probably also have an eviction or foreclosure problem. And so what you really want to do is draw people in with information about their problem, and then have them, following you so they can see other important information that they maybe didn't even know they had a problem. When you can do it, it's really great to not, if you're on Twitter, retweeting people is great. It helps build relationships. It's really great if you can come up with your own tweets, just a few. It'll be really helpful. And then, this is more of a kind of an advanced thing that I can talk to someone about offline. But, if you are kind of doing anything where you're trying to spread the word about something, consider creating a social media kit with graphics and sample tweets and sample posts that people can use. A lot of you have maybe seen this for grassroots kind of campaigns and advocacy projects, but you can also do this for client resources. If a new resource comes out, if a new law, or just really anything, if you want to put together a social media kit, a lot of people will share that. I think this one kind of is a little more of a complicated topic. My contact information is on the first and last slide of this presentation. If this is something you're interested in, just reach out to me, because I think there's a lot to say about it. Okay, so now we're going to go through the different tools, and I'll give you a sense of sort of how to use these different tools, some of the best practices, some of my tips and tricks. The thing I will say first for Facebook is that if you were going to do one social media account, Facebook is it. If your organization has no social media, no online presence, and you want to start with one account, Facebook is the account to start with. More people are on Facebook. It's really it's the big one. It's still the big one. It's not my favorite. It's probably my third favorite personally, but it's probably the best one for our work. So the thing about Facebook is that people who like you or follow you on Facebook generally have a favorable impression of you. Facebook, at least for our organizations, is not going to be something where people are necessarily following you who don't like you. You're going to get a lot of friends, family, happy clients. That's, at least who you're going to start off with. And then people who see the value of your work. Donors are on Facebook. So that is something to think about. I think, to the extent that you do any online fundraising, Facebook is probably the best platform for it, maybe Instagram too. Twitter is not a good platform to get donations. I would not spend a lot of time trying to get donations on Twitter. But Facebook, because people really like you and connect with you on Facebook, just based on kind of the way that it's structured, that's a really good place for that. The third point, I was trying to figure out how do I explain this. So it used to be that on Facebook, for those of you who've used Facebook for more than a few years, you know this, it used to be that you could just like a post, right? you could hit the like button. And now you can actually hit a bunch of different buttons, the sadness button, the anger button, you know, those kind of things. But I would say that when you post on Facebook, you want to post like something where people can have a like, you know, a connection to it, if that makes any sense. So I would say, you know, if SNAP benefits are being cut, you know, or if you're posting an article about hunger, say, yeah, that's a good example. Say you're posting an article about a spike in hunger, right? Well, you don't want to just post, you know, hunger is really rising in Pennsylvania. You want to, you know, write, hunger is really rising in Pennsylvania. That's why SNAP is so important. Give some people something they can connect with. It's just sort of a better way of getting engagement. You know, that's just, I mean, it's something that I started off with doing. I think I'll probably end up sending you all this article that Debbie Freeman and I wrote for the next MIE journal that has a little more information about that. But it's just sort of like, you want to think about how people are using the platform. And for Facebook, it's really something that people need to make a connection with what you're saying. And so if you can put like a sort of a proactive or affirmative spin on something, you'll do better. The one thing I want to say, because this always comes up, is that people think that Instagram is for the younger people and Facebook is for the boomers. And while that's like technically true, a bunch of studies have shown that lower income young people still use Facebook. So we're talking about 18 to 24-year-olds. If we're talking about our clients, Facebook is still a good place to reach them. Higher income people in the 18 to 24 range are really more on Instagram and are really abandoned Facebook. But, you know, and I made sure my studies are still current, and one from 2018 still said that, you know, the lower income young people are still on Facebook. So don't discount that when you're trying to do youth justice work. And then a lot of people, you know, ask me about Facebook ads because CLS does Facebook ads. I think they're great. I think you can spend $100, $200 and, you know, get a good, get some bang for your buck. I'm happy to talk more about that offline. But I was having a conversation recently about Google ads, and I sort of wanted to just bring up this point that Google is for people who are searching for answers to something, and Facebook is for people who don't know that they even have a problem or don't know that they need answers. So what I mean by that is, if you think about wage theft, you know, someone not getting paid for overtime, Google is for someone who is putting in a search box, you know, something like, my employer didn't pay me overtime. Facebook is for, you know, asking a question in your ads or in your post, did your employer not pay you overtime? If you're on Facebook, you don't necessarily know, you know, or if you're just passive about something, you don't necessarily know that you've been a victim of wage theft, that you've been a victim of a crime, that you have legal rights. By the time someone is Googling you, they know that they have a problem and they need a solution. And that's just sort of something to keep in mind when you're sort of deciding what to say. Okay. That was Facebook. Like I said, Facebook is the big one. If you are going to choose one account, I would say Facebook. I will say, I'm just going to admit straight up that I think Twitter is really, really, really useful for advocacy more than anything else. And so I understand that restricted programs view advocacy differently, and everyone is different. I would say, first of all, if you are an unrestricted program, get on Twitter. Absolutely get on Twitter. If you're a restricted program, you should use Twitter, but you just want to sort of think strategically about what you're doing. So Twitter is, I mean, look, people, I've noticed a lot more people are on Twitter now. I notice a lot of people have started joining Twitter recently, and I think it's because people get their news from Twitter. People want to talk about the election. People want to talk about COVID. People want to talk about current events. And, you know, a lot of people are joining Twitter, I think, for that reason. But predominantly, it is going to be, you know, activist types, journalists, and elected officials are on Twitter. Journalists and elected officials are on Twitter all day long. So I would say that when you tweet something, and I think this goes for every single thing you put in writing in every medium, but especially Twitter, do not tweet something that you do not want on the front page of the newspaper, because journalists see it. They quote your tweets all the time in the press. That is just something they do. But again, I would just say literally anything you put in writing, you should expect to have on the front page of the newspaper, always. So I think one thing that's really interesting about Twitter is that people who follow you, people who retweet your stuff, don't necessarily like you. They don't necessarily have a favorable impression of you. I would say that for most legal aid organizations, people probably do like you if they're on Twitter, but it's not a rule. There are a lot of people who have a variety of feelings about certain elected officials, but they follow them anyway, right? CLS has, really tried to be a news source for people. We really try to be a place where people can get up-to-date information. And so I imagine that we have plenty of people who follow us on Twitter. They don't love us, right? They're not like our Facebook family. They're like, people who want to get information, and they may or may not like us, but they will, follow us, and they will retweet our content. But it's just something to keep in mind that it's very different audiences. One of the things that I put in the 60 minutes a day document is that tagging journalists is a really great way to get their attention, to show them that you liked an article. So if you want to get on someone's radar, I would say tag them. This is really great for recognizing somebody for doing something, great. So oh, I love this article by X, Y, and Z journalist, and tag them. Or, thank you, councilperson blah, for doing this expungement clinic with us. That is, that's a good place to give people recognition. I think heartwarming stuff, because it's not people who necessarily love you on Twitter, it does fine maybe, but it's not, I wouldn't have high expectations of it. If you post something a nice client thank you note and you don't get a lot of people liking it, that's Twitter for you. That's not anything that you've done wrong, but that stuff is going to do better on Facebook and Instagram. Don't put too many hashtags in your tweets. 1 is great, 3 is too many, and 2 really depends on the situation. But the most important thing I will say for Twitter is, if you want to post to do well, and by do well, I mean get liked, get shared, get seen, the person who is reading it really needs to go, hey, I didn't know that. That is the #1 way to get engagement on Twitter, and probably on a lot of social media, but especially on Twitter. You want them to be like, I didn't know that was happening. And then you want them to share it because they want other people to know it's happening. So that's Twitter. I would say, I didn't do these in any particular order, but I will say that Facebook is the first one I would recommend getting on, and then Twitter. That's the next one. If you were going to do 2 social media sites, I would say Facebook and Twitter. Instagram. So a lot of people keep asking me about Instagram. I think Instagram at this point is really a combination between Facebook and Twitter in terms of what its function is. So people always want to know, oh, how do I do Instagram? We don't have a lot of pretty pictures and things like that. And I am now telling you, after months of the pandemic and after learning a lot, that actually when you post flyers, they do well. People post flyers on Instagram now. We post flyers with tons of client information. And a lot of people share them in their stories. They actually travel really well. I think that, the best thing to do is, like I said, take a flyer that has a lot of information, post that flyer as, the front page sort of the post. This is not gonna mean anything to people who don't use Instagram, but basically you wanna take a flyer, you wanna post the whole thing, and then you wanna break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks and post that too. It's just, that's what performs well. And I would say screenshots of articles. So if you are quoted in an article, take a screenshot and post that to Instagram. This is also not gonna mean anything to people who have never used Instagram before, but you can't put a link in an Instagram post. But there is one place on your bio, on your Instagram page, where you can put a link. So they have these things called link trees that let you post a whole bunch of links at once. If this means nothing to you, just email me or call me. I will explain this. But just know that if you use Instagram, that's something you wanna do. You wanna get something where you can post a bunch of links. So it's starting to have a pretty big activist scene on Instagram, which I think is really cool. It's really starting to become, an activist thing. So pay attention to hashtags involved in issues, that you if there's an issue that you work on, pay attention to what hashtags are used, and do that on Instagram, but don't take a hashtag that's being used for something else and then interrupt it with your thing if it's not relevant, because it's just not good form. And then I would say that Instagram is a great place to post a photo of a staff member and a narrative. If you want to take a look at CLS's social media accounts in the past week or 2, we've done some really amazing staff narratives, and also client stories are great, and you can use a stock photo for that. Kelly, do you need to interrupt me now?
I do. Thank you.
Sure.
Attorneys on the webinar, please respond to the CLE poll box that I'm launching now. I will leave it up about 1.5 minutes, and you need to respond to both of the questions. This is the first, and we'll have a second later on. And Caitlin, please go ahead. Thank you.
right, LinkedIn. So I am like starting to come around to LinkedIn. We've had a LinkedIn forever. I'm one of those people who's like, ooh, networking, I don't want to do that. LinkedIn's great. I know it is great. You should have a LinkedIn. If you are in a position where you can have multiple social media sites for your organization, say LinkedIn is a really good one to have. If you work with a lot of pro bono volunteers, LinkedIn is like a great thing to have. This is where you can make, you can make good connections with people. This is where, a lot of private bar attorneys spend their time, and that includes young professionals. We have this amazing group of young professionals called Justice Rising Advocates, and our executive committee has told me they're all on LinkedIn. So that's a wonderful place to recognize them for their hard work, share articles that they would like, things like that. I think LinkedIn is a decent place to make a case for donations. I'm not sure we've ever posted a donation link on LinkedIn. Maybe we've done once or twice. We're starting to use LinkedIn more. Danny Vendesky, our development director, loves LinkedIn and is really sort of bringing us into doing that more and more. But I think LinkedIn is a great place to sort of make the case for why people should give to you. So really just like showing off your work, because these are people who I think will get your appeals later on. And so it's just sort of nice to and Facebook is good for that as well, is, keep sharing information that you think will make a case for donating to you, even if you don't have a donate link in that post. If you keep sharing it, then by the time you send an appeal, people will have sort of seen what you're doing. So I would think that that's a really good thing. But really, LinkedIn is great for recognizing people and stewarding your donors and stewarding your volunteers. So if you have Volunteer of the Month, get on LinkedIn, share their photo, tag them, tag their firm. That's really, LinkedIn is one where you want to do a lot of tagging of somebody. So that's, what I will say for LinkedIn is that I think, I don't know that many of our clients are on LinkedIn. They might be, I don't know. But I will say that, we know our board members are on LinkedIn. We know our big donors are on LinkedIn. We know that a lot of firms use LinkedIn. So really that is, I would say that is something for at least the development side should really be looking at. YouTube and videos. So what I will say about YouTube is that I like YouTube for hosting videos, by which I mean we will upload a video to YouTube. Rarely do people watch videos on YouTube, our videos. Rarely do people watch our videos on YouTube. The exception to that is that if we have sort of keywords, there's a place where you can put keywords in. One place where we've been really successful is we have a video on the dangers of rent-to-own agreements. And I'm telling you about this because a lot of the shady rent-to-own companies actually use YouTube for their advertisements. So one of the things that we did is we looked at their advertisements and we took whatever keywords they use and we put it in the keywords of our video. And we did that so that every time somebody, sees a shady ad for rent to own, they also see our video on the dangers of rent to own agreements. So there are some clever ways you can use YouTube. By and large, I like YouTube as a place where we can post a video and then there's an embed code and we embed videos directly onto our website or into our newsletter. And that's the best way of getting views. I will also say, anytime you can, post the video itself to your social media accounts rather than posting a YouTube link. So Facebook is great for this, right? You can post super long videos on Facebook. So you would literally upload the video into Facebook with your description rather than just sharing a link on Facebook. It makes a huge difference. Twitter's a little tricky because you only have 2 minutes on Twitter. If you can trim a video down to 2 minutes, post the video on Twitter rather than posting a link to YouTube, but sometimes you have to post a link to YouTube and that's fine. I feel like I have done a few sessions about Powtoon. I know Molly Pollock, our communications associate, did a training on Powtoon last year at the Plan Conference. So I think if this is the first you're ever hearing of Powtoon, but you want to learn about creating animated explainer videos, come talk to me. But if you have kind of heard of it, you're thinking about it, spend the $700 for the semi-premium version or whatever they call it. I can go into the details of it, but I will just say for what we do and for what you're going to do, that $700 is worth the money. I can talk to you more about that more specifically, depending on your situation afterwards. Okay, e-marketing programs. So I'm just checking the time. Okay, e-marketing programs. So I'm talking about Constant Contact. I'm talking about MailChimp. I'm talking about, I think, Salesforce. There are a few others like that. But basically, I'm talking about like e-newsletters and email blasts and, you know, appeals and things like that when I'm talking about e-marketing. So what I really like about these programs is that a lot of people who are not on social media are still online and in your network. I have noticed that we have a lot of private bar attorneys on our email list. They're not necessarily on social media, but they all have email addresses and they like to get our newsletter, and that's how we connect with them. So a lot of what we do is we post stuff, you know, on social media throughout the month, and then at the end of the month we put together a newsletter with some highlights, and that goes out to them. And for some of our board members or some of our, you know, people who are just not on social media, this is a really good way of reaching them. I do think that with LinkedIn, you get some of those people that you didn't get with other social media sites, but that, you know, it's really worth it to have an e-marketing program. If you're gonna, even if you're gonna send out like one email quarterly, you probably are still getting something out of it. So I would say this is a really good place to reach your donors. I mean, this is a good place to reach lots of people, right? The other thing I will say, and I realize I did not put this on any of the slides, is that very occasionally, if there is a really important communication to our clients, we will pull out of legal server an email list. You know, so if it's like there is a, you know, there's something that's happening for people who receive unemployment. You know, we have been known to pull lists out of legal server of everybody who has unemployment income on their account, you know, get their email list and send them a quick e-blast. And that, you know, we also did something for the census where, you know, we encouraged all of our clients with email addresses to fill out the census by, you know, doing an e-blast. And we also did that on social media, you know, in hopes that we would reach as many clients as possible. So I will say I did not put this on the slide for no apparent reason, but it's actually a really good idea to like think about these e-marketing programs in terms of reaching people that you can't reach otherwise. The other thing that's not in here, but I feel like I should say it, is that, you know, when you're giving someone information, they need to hear it 7 times before it sinks in. That's, you know, there have been studies that show that people need to hear stuff over and over and over again. So it's, you know, if you want someone to know something, it's not a bad idea to post about it on social media, you know, multiple times and then send them an email, right? That's actually a good thing to do. So I would say, to the extent that you can, and they're not, you know, even I mean, there are free e-marketing programs out there. If you want to spend a little money, you can. This is on a later slide. I would not recommend Constant Contact, despite the fact that I use Constant Contact at CLS, and for my son's school, I do the weekly newsletter and we use Constant Contact there. I find it very wonky and hard to use. I find it really hard to use on anything other than a computer. So like they have apps that like are not useful. So I will say that I'm not going to look at the chat right now. If you have an email marketing program that you love, whether or not it's free, drop that in the chat. People, you know, make your recommendations in the chat if there's something that you are using that you really like. And if you like Constant Contact, tell people that too, that's fine. But, you know, feel free to, you know, drop that in the chat if you have any recommendations. I do think it's hard to build your list for email marketing. I mean, you can, technically, you probably could take your donor database and your legal server, you know, database and just add everyone to your e-marketing program. You're not technically supposed to do that because you're supposed to have their permission. So, you know, I leave that up to you. We don't do that. We really get people's permission to contact them. So what I will say is that, you know, prominently on your website, there should be a donation button, first of all, on every single page, very prominently, but also a newsletter sign up button. Put it on your social media. Every month, every quarter that you do a newsletter, post a link to that newsletter on your social media with telling people how they can sign up for your newsletter. And on your donation forms, that's paper and also online, have a checkbox for people to sign up for your newsletter. So I would do that, invest the time in doing that. You know, you do it throughout the year, and then when you want to send people appeals at the end of the year, you have their information, or people are just on your list. So give people a variety of ways to sign up for your newsletter. And if you meet someone new, like if you're working in development and you meet someone one-on-one, or you meet a group of people, feel free to ask them, hey, would you like to receive our newsletter? And take down their email address and type it in yourself. Like, build your list. It takes time, it's worth it. Okay, just want to make a note that paper appeals are better than email appeals, which are better than social media appeals. I think that says it all. Just, you know, don't stop mailing people. Don't stop putting stuff in the paper mail. Even now, with all that's going on in the world, paper mail is best. Email appeals are still better than social media appeals, but like, it's not a bad idea to try them all. But if you were limited in your resources, start with paper. Here's how I like to do a newsletter, and I'm gonna then contradict myself in like 1 minute. So if you were doing a newsletter and you didn't know where to start, a good format would be client story, an organizational update, something about your organization, a resource for clients, and maybe an advocacy update or something kind of like something that displays your work, but maybe on like a more systemic level, if you can do that. If you can't, like, you know, pick 4 or 5 things, pick some highlights. If you've been posting on social media throughout the month, take a look at the things that have gotten the most likes and share those in your newsletter. So that would be my tip. Now I'm gonna say that I'm gonna skip 2 points, come back to those. So I really like to have a newsletter that does not have a ton of items. I like to have just highlights. You know, I do recognize that I have said that this is sometimes the only contact people have with you if they're not on social media. So I can see the argument for having more. I like to, you know, keep it pretty simple because I think people will tune out. I think what you should do is sort of know who your target audience is and know who your actual audience is, because you can see who's signed up for your newsletter and figure out kind of who they are. Figure out what they want to read, and you will have a better chance of getting them to read your stuff. That said, all of that said, we keep it really simple. I will say that LASP has a fantastic newsletter. They have a lot of information in their newsletter. Marianne does an amazing job with it. Theirs looks great. You can tell how much time and effort has gone into it. I would say that like LASP has one of the best newsletters I've seen. They are making it work with a lot more information than we do. And I would say that if you are interested in having a lot of information in a newsletter, or you're not sure what you want to do, I have not asked Marianne Fraley if people can reach out to her, but I'm going to tell you to reach out to Marianne Fraley because she does it. She does a great job. I love LASP's newsletter. It's completely different than ours. That's all I'm going to say about that is, you know, choose your own adventure here. And like I said, I would not recommend constant contact, but, you know, like I said, chime in the chat if you love it. Chime in the chat if you've got something else you love. You know, and especially if it's free. If you have something you love that's free, like, go ahead and let everyone know about that. Constant contact costs money. We also, I will say, we use it for like a huge clean slate campaign. So we're spending, you know, a lot more money than you're going to spend on it, just based on the fact that like we have like a whole statewide side project going on. But that's, you know, that's what I'll say about constant contact. I don't love it. Okay, so how are I doing on time? Okay, well, I'm going to somehow make this quick. I have like 4 slides on traditional media. Traditional media is my passion. I love it. I love working with the press. I just like, I get a real kick out of it. I think it's an amazing thing to do. I think, you know, everything that I have told you so far is about stuff where you have to put a lot of time and work into building your lists, into building your followers, into like doing stuff regularly so you can keep reaching people. It takes a lot of time and effort to reach people. If you get in the news like once or twice, a lot of people are going to hear about you because they like have such a broad reach. And so, you know, my advice is always try to get in the news when you can. It also provides what's called third-party validation, which means that somebody else is saying something like on behalf of you without you having to be the one to say it. So if you ever feel like you are spending a ton of time talking to a journalist and providing background information and then you're not quoted, as long as the article is good, as long as your message got across, that is just as good. It is just as good for a journalist, you know, to write about something that as it is for you to just say it, right? That like there's still a lot of benefit there. So put the time into working with journalists when you can. All right, so it is a lot of work, but I'm going to save you some time. If you need to do a press conference because you have like a partnership, like you are working with an elected official who wants to do a press conference, you have a big funder who's giving you a lot of money and they want to do a press conference, do a press conference. I feel like if it's just your organization, there are some times where you want to do a press conference. If it's something huge, if it's something that like the mayor is involved or the governor is involved, or it's like, you know, it's like big TV news, like do it. By and large, like you should not be doing more than 1 or 2 press conferences a year. You really shouldn't be. This is not a regular thing you should be doing. They take a lot of time. I don't think they're worth the effort. I really don't think press releases are worth the effort. We do a press release when we file gigantic litigation that helps hundreds of thousands of people. we do a press release if we created a new law that helps hundreds of thousands of people. Otherwise, we will do a press release if like a partner wants us to do a press release, you know, and it's like something that means a lot to them, or we feel like that's like an important thing for them. But I don't do a press release to get media attention, by and large. I do it to get like to, you know, be a good partner. They're just not worth the effort. The more you work with a journalist, the less you need to write. So I will say at this point, if I'm working with a journalist a lot, my pitch to them is going to be 3 sentences. They can call me if they want more information, and they will, because they know us and they trust us, and because I've not given them something that's so long that it takes them a lot of time to read it. So sum it up in a few sentences. If you can't sum it up in a few sentences, that's, you know, it's not going to work well with media anyway, because they're not going to have enough space to write, you know, a 3-page press release, right? Like they don't have the, you know, the column inches to do that. So I would say that, you know, you probably are doing press releases maybe 3-4 times a year, and press conferences maybe once or twice a year. If you're doing it more than that, like, I have questions. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're not doing it the way I would advise you to do it. So, you know, that's something to think about. Don't spend a lot of time on this. Where I would spend some time is if you have something that you want to blast out, if you have a paragraph pitch or a press release, whatever it is, I do not want you to, okay, so the worst thing you can do is take a bunch of journalists' email addresses and put them all in a CC line or all in the to line. That's like the worst thing you can do. The second worst thing you can do is BCC all those people. The best thing you can do is email them one at a time and take the time and say, hey, I think you'd be interested in this because X, Y, and Z. Like, you just wrote about blah, or I know your beat is blah, something that's personal. That's the best thing you can do. I promise you, you will get a lot more media attention if you do that. It will take you longer. It will be worth it. If you do want to pitch to 2 different reporters, the same outlet, like there are ways to do it, but you got to copy them both on the same email or tell them that you've pitched it to both of them. And there are reasons that you might want to do that, right? If you've got an issue about, you know, like involving Medicaid, you know, and there's like somebody who is on a health beat and someone who's on a poverty beat, like I pitched to both of them, but I would tell them, hey, I'm sending it to both of you at once because it's your beat and it's your beat. Do that. Do not blast stuff out to like a whole list. But if you do blast it out to a whole list, please at least BCC them. And really like think about, you know, where your audience gets their news, right? So like, I would say that, you know, a lot of clients, not to stereotype, a lot of clients probably are not reading the Wall Street Journal because it costs money to read. Now, some clients, you know, pay for news and that's fine. But I would say by and large, like, you know, these prestige outlets, these statewide, these like national outlets, if they have a paywall, you're less likely to have a client read it because they are spending their money on rent and other things like that. You know, but I would say that, you know, there's some hyper local papers in Philadelphia, you know, like Kensington has its own outlet. And I love that outlet, right? I love pitching to places that are small and local if that's where our clients are getting their news. So really just think strategically about where people are getting their news. I honestly feel like I could do a whole section or a whole session on that. So like maybe I will someday. But I just, you know, really be thoughtful. And, you know, I would say that if you are trying to get the attention of elected official, whether or not you are doing, you know, restricted advocacy or unrestricted or whatever, but if you just wanted to like put something out there, you know, and your elected official lives in, you know, Reading, like it's better to be in the Reading Eagle than it is to be in the New York Times. It is what it is. So just think really strategically about where people are getting their news. Ask your clients, ask your board members, ask people. That's, I think, a really great way to do things. Okay, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna make it work. So the biggest downside, I would say, to doing traditional media is that you absolutely have no control over the framing or who else is quoted. So I would assume that if you are on one side of an issue, they are going to quote the other side, right? If you are an attorney preventing evictions, the landlord lobby is going to get in that article. It's just how it is. What you don't have control over it. So what I will say is like, spend time researching the journalist. If you get called up, especially, spend time researching the journalist. Go to their Twitter and see what do they write about people like your clients. You know, what is their general tone, because how they write on Twitter is going to be for a lot of people how they write an article, or at the very least, like, it's a really quick and dirty way of figuring out if somebody is going to trash your clients. Remember those talking points I told you about? I think you should, have talking points prepped for pretty much every issue you work on. But if you know eviction is going to become a problem and you know there's stuff coming down the pike, like, prep your talking points well in advance. Know who is authorized to speak with the media. If there's an issue that you wanted to get out into the media, have somebody who has been approved by your executive director, or it is your executive director, but have somebody who okay, if they're called by if we get a call from the media about this issue, here is who gets that call. The biggest thing I would say for any of this stuff, if you get contacted, is first of all, feel free to provide a written statement rather than being interviewed if you don't feel comfortable. But no jargon, no legalese, keep it short, and assume that they will take just one sentence out of whatever you write. So make sure every single sentence can stand on its own. And if somebody calls you, if a journalist calls you, absolutely, and you're not prepared, unless you're super prepared for it, which you probably aren't, honestly, I want you to ask the journalist, what is the absolute deadline for me to get back to you? Then I want you to hang up the phone, go to their Twitter, research the journalist to make sure it's someone you actually want to talk to, and prepare for your interview using those talking points. Write down the 3 messages you want to get across. Do not just give an interview off the cuff unless this is your issue and you've been doing it forever and you have a ton of media experience. I really cannot reiterate enough that a journalist is going to push you around a little bit and say, I need to talk to you now. You do not have to talk to them. It is better to decline an interview than it is to have something quoted that you said incorrectly, or you get misquoted because you weren't prepared. I know I'm being a little harsh on this one, but it is because it is such a common mistake. And what'll happen is you'll have one bad interview and you'll never want to do media again. And I don't want that. Okay. I'm almost done. I am going to rush through. Kelly said I could have a few extra minutes at the end if I didn't get through this, and I knew I wasn't going to get through it. And I'm sorry about that. So op-eds persuade people. That's all you need to know about that. There are studies. You can Google it. Op-eds are great, and blogs, because you can control the entire message, all of the content. So there's no framing issues, right? It's everything you write is what's in there. I want to let you know, an op-ed, so that's something that's published in the newspaper or on a site, as opposed to a blog, which you self-publish. You cannot control the headline in an op-ed. And I have seen some headlines, I'm oh, that's not great. But as long as your content is what you want it to be, which it should be, you're fine. Op-eds are better than blogs because, blog is on your website and you have to drive traffic to your website, but op-eds get tons and tons and tons of readers. Blog posts are better if you can't fit what you need to say into 600 or 700 words. And frankly, I think you should figure out how to do that. But if you can't, put it on your website as a blog. And also if you try to place something and you've tried 3 or 4 outlets and you can't get it placed, then put it on your blog. I feel if you're considering writing an op-ed, I want you to call me or text me or email me, and I will talk you through some things because I am run out of time. But there's so much I want to say. But the last point I will make about this is that timeliness is key. So if something comes out in the news and you want to write an op-ed about it, you have 24 to 48 hours to get it done, which is why you want to have talking points prepped on your issues, because then you can use your talking points to structure your op-ed. Especially and a letter to the editor as well. You can't take a week to get it reviewed. Now, if you want to proactively publish an op-ed, if you want to say, hey, let's get an op-ed out there about something that hasn't been in the news, you have more time, truly, but try to not have 6 different signers. They're not going to let you do that, but try not to have 6 different signers and 20 people review it. Try to just get things done, get it quickly. It still needs to be professional. It still needs to be good. I don't think you should be spending weeks writing an op-ed. All right, I'm really running out of time here, but this is the last one, I think. So we get a lot of traffic through Google. So, just know that if you have a little money, if you have some stimulus money, if you have some money, getting your website sort of up to date and clean and well designed and modern and accessible is great. What you need to keep your website up to date. You need to. Every single page that has intake information or client information or whatever, you need to keep reviewing it at least quarterly to make sure everything is still true. If you have stuff that's changing moment by moment, that's when you want to have a news or issues section with a blog style format with dates attached to everything. So people will kind of see, okay, this article is more recent than that article. that's, you know, I'm going to rush through these last few points. Okay, so if you have money, get an accessibility consultant. CLS is doing that right now. Try to keep things on your website like screen reader friendly. So if you have like information in a PDF, take all that text, paste just the text into your website, because that's going to be more accessible. Think about what people are actually Googling, right? So like, think about if somebody is like, you know, if someone is a victim of wage theft, they're not going to Google employment crime. They're going to Google my boss didn't pay me. So just sort of think about that. Pay attention. If you have Google Analytics in your website, which is great if you can do that, pay attention to what people are Googling to get to you, and then write your content to sort of fit that. And much like with social media sites and like multiple sites and multiple things, do not create a bunch of different websites for your issues. I don't think each issue should have its own website. The exceptions are going to be if you have funding. If someone hands you like $100,000 and is like, I need you to create a website on this issue, like go ahead and do that. If you're working in a coalition and it just like doesn't work to have like it just be hosted on your site, you really need to like share the credit and the branding and all that stuff, that's fine. But just generally speaking, like don't create a bunch of different websites. Have everything hosted in your website and work with a designer to make sure people can find stuff. Okay, key takeaways from my presentation. So keep in mind your specific audience and your very, very, very specific goal. It's not, I want clients to know this information. You want clients to call you, or do you want clients to apply for something? Like what specifically do you want your clients to do, or what do you want your audience to do? Work on those talking points the moment you think you're going to want to communicate about anything. And I would say it's not a bad idea to look at all the legal issues you tackle and have talking points for each of those. Keep it simple, keep it concise, keep it to an 8th grade reading level at the highest. And the more work you do on this stuff, I know everything I told you is like, oh, this takes a lot of work. The more work you do, like the easier it gets and the more payoff and the bigger your audience. And eventually like it does not take as much time. Okay, Kelly. Do you have to do a poll, Kelly?
Hi. Yeah, sorry about that. Attorneys, second poll question I'm launching now. Please respond for CLE credit. And Caitlin, we've had a couple questions or comments, but Marion has kind of responded to them all. So
amazing. Marion's the best. Can we just have a moment for Marion, please? Because Marion's the best, honestly. Like, she's one of my favorite colleagues. I love her. I love you, Marion.
Here's something. Are there resources to support writing for an 8th grade reading level?
Yes, there is something called Hemingway, which I think is the right thing for that. Yeah, so I put in the upload thing a couple of documents, and one was about creating flyers, and it has some information, but I think the Hemingway app, and then there's something else, and if it's not on that document, I'll email it to everyone, or I'll email it to Kelly and ask her to email it to everyone. But yes, there's something called Hemingway that can check for readability. And I'm trying to remember the name of the local Kensington paper because I think it's Kensington Voice, but now I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, but Marion responded with a link. Kensington.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. I'm seeing now. I'm seeing everything.
Brianna, I can actually answer your question. I got a text from Hank Leone of Plan during this session, and the documents are actually in Sketch right now.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm going back to, someone asked me for the key takeaways. Yes, those are my key takeaways. All right. Okay. Yeah, Hank is great.
He is.
You know what? Cheers to everyone at Plan. And here's to everyone on the development and communications listserv, because everyone has been super helpful in helping to figure out what we should present on this year and what we want to talk about. And I just think this is such a great network and so many great people. And I'm just really thankful to be part of it.
I agree. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Oh, yeah, wait, hold on. Marion brought up something. Yeah, Marion brought up something that reminded me of something else. So you can cross post to Facebook and Instagram at the same time. The other thing is if you're doing a Facebook ad, you can get it to display on Instagram too. So that's like that because they're owned by the same company. So when you're thinking about, doing ads for stuff, Facebook and Instagram work together. So that's great. I think Google ads are great. Google grants exist, and you can get $10,000. I think it's $10,000 a month in free advertising from Google. And I've like never tried to promote a tweet. And I was actually trying to figure out if I wanted to promote something on YouTube, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that. And you know, that was like 2 days ago, so I'm not there yet. But that reminded me, Instagram ads and Facebook ads are basically the same thing. All right. Thanks everyone for answering all these questions in the chat. We technically made it on time because of all of you.
And you were worried it would go too long. We're early.
Well, I was talking pretty quickly, I feel like. I don't know. It's like, I recognize that I talk like the traditional Northeastern city person that I am. And I don't know, that's not like everyone's thing, but you know, I put a lot of information in the slides. Steve Grum told me to like maybe cut out some of the text, and I did that. They're still pretty text heavy, so, you know, yeah. If you guys have questions, and like I said, my contact information is on the beginning and the end of the presentation. I love answering questions. I will definitely answer, you know, whatever. Yeah, you can feel free to text me, call me, email me. I love to talk about this stuff all day long. I will like talk your ear off about any one of these things, and pretty much every slide could have been its own presentation. There's so much more I want to say. So if you are interested in doing any of this stuff, please reach out to me because I would love to talk to you.
And Caitlin, if you're interested in any more webinars, although not part of the planned conference because we're booked and I can't extend it another month, but I'd be happy to do some standalones anytime you want.
You know what? I think maybe Brianna and I will talk about that then, because I think that, you know, together, I think we've got some really good ideas for things we'd love to talk about. And I know that the communications group or the development group are meeting soon, like on a monthly basis. So I think, you know, we are going to take you up on that. There's a lot of great conversations happening with our group. And I think it would be really cool for us to put together some trainings. And if, you know, if people have questions for me or anything they would like me to train on, whether or not you do development and communications, because I know we've got a fair amount of people who are program staff, I'd love to hear from you about what you're interested in.
That sounds great. I don't see any other. Well, here is one comment. Microsoft has grade level. I'm not sure.
Yeah. You can, when you're doing something in Microsoft, you can, that's right. It will tell you what grade level you're writing to. And this is, I will say, the other thing is, I feel like in various places, I have put right at a 3rd grade level, and it's an 8th grade level, and I got confused between 8 years old and 8th grade. But Sean Morrow told me yesterday that it was 8th grade level, and he is right. I looked this up. I think, you know, you can still go to 6th grade level or a lower grade level than that, but you do not want anything you write to go above an 8th grade level, even if clients are not your audience. The one thing I will tell you, I told this to someone the other day, is that when I started at CLS 8 years ago, I had a 6-month-old baby at home. I was really tired. I'm still tired, but I was really tired with a 6-month-old baby at home. And I promise you, I was not reading a lot. And if someone were to post a wall of text on a social media post, I wasn't reading it. I still don't read it, to be honest. I really keep things, you know, so keep it both in terms of like client accessibility and also in terms of like, you know, your donors, the policymakers, everyone has a lot going on. There's a lot of information out there. So write it as if somebody like has a crying baby on one arm and like has not had enough coffee yet, and like write it that way. Or write it as if they've got an 8-year-old at home doing music class above their head while they're presenting, if you want.
It's always an adventure, right?
It's an adventure.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Caitlin, for your time and for sharing this information
I really appreciate
with
you all
us.
being here.
Thanks for everyone for being here and staying here with us. And everybody have a great rest of the day. Thanks and take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.